I am not trying to be dramatic when I say the carnival in my town ate people. I know how that sounds. I know how Reddit reacts to posts like that. Half the comments will be jokes. The other half will be people asking for proof. I don't have proof that will make anyone feel better. I only have my memory and a scar on my wrist that looks like a faded stamp from a ride that never closes. This happened last August. It was the last hot week before the schools went back. The kind of heat that makes you tired and irritable by noon. Our town is small, and we get excited for anything that isn't the same 3 restaurants and the same creek with the same flat rocks. When the posters went up about a traveling carnival setting up at the fairgrounds, everyone started sharing them. The posters had a black and red design with a carousel horse that looked almost real, and the words, "Night Bloom Carnival, 1 week only." It had this old-fashioned calliope font. You could practically hear the music looking at it. The rumor was that the carnival came from farther north, like 4 towns up. Someone said they only ran at night because they wanted the lights to look better. Someone else said their games weren't rigged, that you could actually win the big prizes. There was a picture of a giant stuffed goat with gold eyes and a crown that people posted. If you wanted one of those goats, you had to get there early or be really good at ring toss. I hadn't planned on going. It wasn't that I was too cool for a carnival. I just didn't have the money to blow on games and greasy food. Also, and this is the part I didn't tell anyone, when I was 11, my little cousin disappeared at a carnival sort of like this one. Not in our town. We were visiting my mom's friend in another county. It was daylight. 1 second, my cousin was holding a blue balloon dog and asking for another funnel cake. The next second, someone bumped me. The string came loose, and he was gone. No Amber Alert ever went out, because his mom swore she saw him climbing into a pickup truck with his dad later that day. Except his dad was 2 states away on a job site and had proof. The cops went in circles until it turned into a sad mystery people stopped talking about. My aunt stopped coming to Thanksgiving. That was a long time ago, but the smell of diesel generators and powdered sugar still makes my stomach go cold. Anyway, I wasn't going. Then my friend Jake texted me and said he had free wristbands for unlimited rides because his older brother was helping set up the electrical and got extras. He said we'd just go one night, ride the rides, laugh at the clown show, grab an elephant ear and split it 4 ways and call it good. He added that Brooke was going and she had invited her cousin Dara, who I had a crush on for about 6 months without saying anything. He did not say that part out loud, but we all knew. So I said sure. We got there around 8, when the sky was still light at the edge, but the carnival lights were already on. The fairgrounds were squashed between the baseball field and an abandoned feed store that had boards over its windows. From the road it looked normal, just a lot of colorful tents and strings of bulbs, and a big Ferris wheel that clicked slowly as it turned. But as we walked closer, I noticed a few things that felt off in a small, quiet way. The air smelled like cinnamon and popcorn, sure, but under that was a sweet chemical smell, like antifreeze or the inside of a new plastic toy. There were no kids screaming or crying. None of the mean toddler meltdowns you expect in a place like that. It was mostly teens and adults, but even the kids that were there were calm in this weird, focused way, like they were at a museum where you aren't supposed to touch things. The music came from somewhere I couldn't find, a calliope song that kept going and going without a seam, like it never had a beginning or an end. At the gate, A woman with a top hat and a red tailcoat scanned our free wristbands. She had a face that was hard to pin to an age. Smooth skin, sharp eyes. She said welcome in a voice that sounded like she could sell you a coffin, and you'd smile while handing over your money. Her name tag said Mara. She stamped the inside of our wrists with a little star that looked like the kind they put on your hand at clubs when you're over 21. I did not catch the design at first. It tingled when it touched my skin. I thought they were using some new kind of ink to mess with people. Inside, everything was bright and busy and easy to get lost in. The Ferris wheel had little open seats with bars that locked by hand. The roller coaster was small, one of those portable ones that fits on the back of a semi. The carousel had horses that looked handmade, with chipped paint in a way that made the chips look like art. The funhouse had a face over the door with a wide mouth that you walk through. The face had eyes that followed you. I don't mean like a painting trick. I mean I walked right, and the eyes followed. Jake laughed when I said that, and waved his hand in front of the face. The eyes watched his hand. We went to the ring toss first because Dara wanted the gold-eyed goat. The carny running it was an old guy with arms like rope and a sunburn that looked permanent. He had a cigarette behind his ear and an ashtray full of tickets. He explained the rules in a flat voice. 3 rings for $5, or 15 rings for a wristband special. The bottles were spaced, and the rings were just the right size to make it hard without being impossible. Jake went first and missed every time. Brooke got 1 ring around a bottle. Dara got 2 and shrugged like it was nothing. I threw like I was skipping stones and landed 1 out of 15. The old guy didn't comment. When Dara paid for another set, he squinted at the stamp on her wrist and said something under his breath. She finished the second set with 3 bottles, and he gave her a small goat, not the big gold-eyed one, but a smaller version with cheap fur and a tiny crown. He saw her face and said, "Big prizes are only for the after-hours challenge." She asked what challenge, and he just smiled with his mouth but not his eyes. We did the carousel next. I got on a horse with a cracked blue saddle. The paint had chipped away around the edges where hands held on. When the ride started, the music shifted a little. The calliope got louder, even though the instrument wasn't anywhere near us. The horses moved up and down in a slow rhythm. It should have been boring. It wasn't. I got this feeling like the horse was trying to adjust under me. When I glanced down, the carved wooden ear was turned back the tiniest bit, as if it was listening. I told myself I was imagining things because I had the old fear stuck in my head. I looked around. Dara rode a black horse with flared nostrils and a red ribbon around its neck. She laughed and said it felt like the horse had a pulse. Jake rolled his eyes and called her dramatic, but he was gripping the pole tight and not looking down. We got off and drifted toward the funhouse. Brooke wanted to do the mirror maze. The entrance yawned and you could see your own reflection multiplied into a crowd. There was a teenage worker in a striped shirt taking tickets. He had a lazy eye that made his gaze slide past you. He pointed at a sign that said, "No running, and no touching the glass, and no phones out." I don't know why they cared about phones. Maybe people broke the illusion if they used the camera. We handed over our wristbands and he stamped them again with a different little symbol, a tiny crown this time, as if we collected them like badges. He said to keep our left hand on the wall, and we'd come out fine. Inside it was cool and smelled like Windex. The mirrors were clean, the kind of clean that made you see every pore on your face. We started together, laughing at how close we came to bumping our noses. Brooke said she could see a pizza place across the glass, which made no sense, but she was probably just trying to be funny. The music outside got softer, like someone turned it down. I think I noticed then that I still heard it, but not with my ears. It was like when you remember a song and hear it without hearing it. It kept the same steady tempo. We got to a T-junction and decided to split, because that's what dumb people in stories do. We weren't trying to be dumb. We just thought it would be funny to see who got out first. Jake went left with Brooke. I went right with Dara. Our path was tight. The mirrors made it feel tighter. If you've never been in one of those, it's hard to explain how weird your body feels when your brain is getting mixed signals about distance. You think the way is open and then your nose hits glass. You think you are about to hit something and it isn't there. The lights were white and cold. Every third or fourth pane had a tiny smudge in the same spot, like a fingerprint that never got wiped. I tried to keep my left hand on the wall, like the teenager said, but there were sections where the mirror was the wall, and sections where a seam was painted to look like a seam. 10 minutes in, I felt stupid for thinking anything strange about the place. I had built it up in my head. I just wanted out. That's when I saw the child. She couldn't have been more than 8. She had a yellow dress on and muddy shoes. She moved down the corridor on the other side of the mirror with quick, bird-like steps, like she was trying hard to be quiet and fast at once. I caught her eyes for a second. They were gray and wide and felt a little empty, like she hadn't slept in a long time. Her hand lifted and pointed to the left fork. She didn't speak. She just pointed, held it, and then was gone. I grabbed Dara's wrist without thinking and pulled her left. She didn't argue because she had seen the girl too. We rushed until we got to a spot where the corridor bent in a long curve. At the end of the curve, I could see a figure who I thought was the same girl. But when we got closer, it was a reflection of me. I looked sickly in that mirror. My face was drawn and my pupils were big. I thought, okay, that's a trick mirror. Then my reflection lifted its hand before I did. It touched its wrist and tapped twice where the stamp was. I hadn't raised my hand. Dara saw it happen and made a sound like a swallowed shout. We backed up. My shoulder hit glass where there had been a gap seconds before. The corridor behind us pinched closed like a throat swallowing. I pressed my fingers to where it had been open. Cold glass. The music was still doing the same steady pulse. I started to count beats without meaning to. 10 beats. Step. 10 beats. Pause. My heart tried to sink. We didn't run. Running would have been a mistake. I don't know how I knew that. I just knew that if we ran, we would hit something that wasn't meant to be hit, and then our names would be added to a list no one sees. I kept my voice easy and steady and said, okay. Left hand on the wall again. Slow and steady. Dara squeezed my wrist and nodded. We turned. Straight. Turned. Straight. I could see our faces over and over. Sometimes we looked like ourselves. Sometimes we looked older or younger. Once, for a second, the mirror showed me with a shaved head and a scar I don't have. Once it showed Dara with eyes too dark, like her pupils had swallowed the irises. We don't have black eyes. It was a trick mirror, or my brain was overheating. I tried to focus on the path. The mirrors were singing. That's the only way I can describe the sound. It wasn't a voice. It was like glass hums when you rub a wet finger around the rim of a wine glass, except deeper and steadier. It matched the calliope tempo. 10 beats, step, 10 beats, pause. My stamp tingled under my skin. It itched. I scratched and felt raised bumps. My stomach dropped. I looked. The little star was not a star. It was a wheel with spokes, like a Ferris wheel with 12 spokes, and a tiny crown in the center. When I pressed my thumb on it, I could feel the skin shift, like the lines were cut a fraction of a millimeter deep. We came out into a little circular room. It wasn't really a room. It was a space where 5 corridors met. In the middle, a stool with 3 legs, painted red. On top of the stool, a prize goat. Not the small one. The big one with gold eyes and a crown. It should not have been possible for the goat to be there. It was behind glass no matter which way you looked. But when I reached to pick it up, my hand didn't hit anything. My fingers closed on fake fur. The goat was heavy in a way stuffed toys aren't. I set it back down immediately, because the moment I picked it up, the mirrors around us changed from showing our reflections to showing people standing behind our reflections. The people were blurred, but I could see shapes of hats and coats that weren't modern, and I could see faces like old photographs, all gray and soft. They were crowding behind us with silent mouths, and every mouth was open. You know the moment when your brain goes from "wow, this is creepy," to "we are in actual danger"? It is a clean break. It is cold and sharp. I had that moment right there. I took Dara's hand again and said, "We are leaving. No jokes. No looking at anything else. We are leaving." The goat's gold eyes were watching us. I don't like typing that. I know it makes me sound like I have a fever. The eyes were plastic or glass. They were still watching. The crown had a symbol in the band that matched the stamp under my skin. Something tapped the glass at my back. A friendly little tap, like someone asking to come in. I turned without wanting to turn. My reflection smiled at me with all of my teeth. I was not smiling. It put a finger to its lips and then pointed with 2 fingers down a corridor we had not noticed because it had not been there. I did not want to trust it, but the corridors behind us were closing like an iris, segment by segment, and the lights were dimming a fraction each count of 10. So we went where the wrong version of me pointed. We did not see the worker in the striped shirt again. We found the exit because the smell of cinnamon and hot oil got stronger. The last few steps squeezed us, like the funhouse itself did not want to let us go. When we stumbled out, the night felt different. There were more people, not in a loud way, in a packed elevator way. You could feel them without seeing them. The calliope changed keys. I swear it did. Like a song you know that takes a wrong turn and still pretends it is right. We saw Jake and Brooke waiting near the game with the darts. Jake's face was pale, and he had that fake laugh he uses when he's scared and trying not to be. He said, "Where were you?" And I opened my mouth to say "mirror maze." And Brooke cut in and said they warned us not to go in after 9 because they start changing the route for the midnight show. The midnight show. She said it like she had always known about it. I asked what that meant. She said she didn't know. She just heard someone say it at the ticket stand. But her voice didn't match her words. We decided to do something normal. Corn dogs, lemon shakes, cotton candy. We stood in line and talked about nothing. The cashier looked like the woman at the front gate, but with different hair. Her tag said Mara, too. She stamped the inside of our wrists with the crown again without asking. She said we looked like winners and slid an extra bag of mini donuts across the counter. The donuts were so hot, the sugar melted into a glaze. The sweetness made my teeth ache. We ate without tasting for a couple minutes because it was easier than thinking. Dara held the small goat tucked against her hip like it was a purse. It seemed smaller than before. I don't know why I noticed that. The speakers crackled. The lights on the Ferris wheel shifted from rainbow to solid red like a warning. A barker's voice rolled over the grounds, smooth and low and a little too close. He said, "Ladies and gentlemen, players and patrons, the Night Bloom Carnival presents its midnight show." He said those with the mark may join us for the after-hours challenge. He said those without should go home and sleep in their soft beds and forget their dreams. He said those with the mark, he could see us. He knew the kind of fun we wanted. I don't know why I didn't leave. I don't have a good answer. You'd think the words "those with the mark" would make anyone throw a punch and get out. There was a tug behind my ribs, a pull like a magnet. I saw people around us look at their wrists in the same motion at the same time, like puppets someone had gotten good at. Every wrist glowed for a second where the stamp was, just a little shimmer like gasoline on water. I looked at mine and saw the tiny etched wheel and crown pulsing like a heartbeat. I told Jake we should go. He nodded too quickly and said, yeah, totally, we should. Then he started walking toward the main tent. Brooke followed. Dara and I followed them because the alternative felt like stepping into black water and sinking where no one would see. The main tent had been closed earlier. It was striped red and black and had a carved sign over the entrance that said, "Bloom Stage" in gold. The woman in the tailcoat stood there again, with a handful of glossy paper programs and a bucket with bracelets inside. She offered a bracelet to each of us. It was made of ribbon and little brass bells. She tied mine around my right wrist over the stamp. When the ribbon touched my skin, my ears popped like I was on a plane. She leaned in close and said in a voice only I could hear, "No one is forced to play, but those who play win more than they lose." She smelled like cold flowers and something sour. Inside, the tent was set up with rows of benches and a small ring with sawdust in the middle. The air felt thick with heat. People filled the benches. They looked like our neighbors, our teachers, people from the next town over. In between them sat others I could not place. They had faces the color of old paper and eyes that reflected light in a cat way. They smiled without showing their teeth. A short man in a purple suit walked out and bowed. He had a cane with a little globe on top. He said, "Welcome to our midnight show." He said we have 3 rounds tonight for those who bear the mark. He said round 1 is the carousel game. Round 2 is the wheel. Round 3 is the mirror trade. He spun the cane and the bells on our wrists chimed in unison like we were instruments. He called out numbers instead of names. I realized our stamps had tiny numbers hidden in the spokes. Mine said 47. Jake was 49. Brooke was 51. Dara was 52. The first 10 people went down into the sawdust ring. The short man described the carousel game. He said our carousel is hungry, always. He said the rule is simple. Ride until the music stops and get off your horse before it bites you. Everyone laughed like that was a joke. Then I heard it, the low sound from the carousel outside like a yawn. I felt sick with knowing. The 10 contestants were let out a side flap, and we all strained to see. There was a slit in the tent that let you look out at the carousel. The horses looked different in the red light. Their eyes were too round. Their mouths had teeth that I don't think were there before. Not regular horse teeth. Teeth like a drawer full of knives. The music started and the horses went up and down slow. The contestants looked nervous. They had bells on their wrists too. The short man started a countdown without moving his lips. I swear he did not move them. He held up his hand and spread his fingers for 5 and then 4 and then 3. When he closed his fist, the music cut. Silence hit hard. The riders jumped off. Most made it. 2 did not. The horses were fast even though they were carved wood. They bent their necks all wrong and their mouths opened too wide and they closed around arms and shoulders like doors slamming. There was blood. There was more blood than I thought wooden teeth could draw. The people in the tent clapped. Not all of them. Some of us sat stiff. The ones with the paper faces clapped the loudest. Round 1 ended with a prize. The winners came back inside pale and shaky. The short man gave them each a gold token with a wheel and a crown stamped on it. He said 1 token to buy back 1 lost thing. He did not say what kind of lost thing. The losers did not come back. The woman in the tailcoat went out with a bucket and came back with 2 bells still chiming, ribbons frayed and sticky. She put them on the edge of the ring like trophies. I could stop here and say we ran. We didn't. I keep trying to explain this part to myself. The air felt heavy and sweet, and it was hard to stand up. It was hard to think, like the song was in my bones and telling me that this was fine, that nothing truly bad was happening as long as you followed the rules. I tasted sugar and rust under my tongue. Dara's hand found mine and squeezed. She leaned close and said softly, "If my cousin was in a place like this, would you try to win her back?" She was calling my bluff without meaning to. I thought about the blue balloon dog, about my aunt moving away, about Thanksgiving without laughter. I thought about the tiny girl pointing in the mirror. I thought about the gold-eyed goat. I nodded yes, without knowing what game I was nodding to. Round 2 was the wheel. Not the Ferris wheel, the wheel of fortune on the stage. It was tall as a person and painted in wedges with different symbols. A heart, a key, a hand, an hourglass, an eye. The short man said the rule for the wheel was simple too. Spin it. If it lands on a symbol, you pay its price. Pay, and you pass. Refuse, and you leave empty-handed. I wanted to know what empty-handed meant. He did not define it. He called numbers, not ours. Relief tasted like guilt because if it did not call you, it called someone else. I watched the first woman step up. She spun. It hit the eye. The short man nodded and said, "It sees you. Show it something no one else has seen." She hesitated. He clicked his tongue. She reached for the buttons on her dress, and then changed her mind and dug her nails into her palm until blood welled. She tilted her hand and let the eye in the center of the wheel drink. The wheel shuddered, and the bells on her wrist chimed like laughter. He gave her a token, and she went back to her seat with a face like a sleepwalker. You can say what you want about me here, that I should have stood up and shouted fire or pulled the canvas down. I don't know if that would have helped. The people with the paper faces outnumbered us. I keep coming back to the cold logic of the place. It had rules. The rules had teeth. Breaking them would not free anyone. It would just add your name to the list. When he called 47, my heart stuttered. I stood up because my legs knew what to do, even if my head did not. The sawdust was soft under my shoes. The wheel smelled like old varnish and a little like pennies. I put my hands on the pegs and took a breath and spun. It went around and around, clicking like a bicycle with a broken spoke. It slowed and settled on the hourglass. The short man clapped once. Not for me, for the wheel. He said time wants its share. He said give it a year. I stared at him like he had asked me to chew glass. He smiled, still no teeth. He said not off your life. Off something you will never finish. I knew exactly what he meant. There is a list in my phone of things I plan to do. Learn guitar, drive to the coast and sleep in the car and watch the sunrise over the ocean. Get my degree. Ask Dara out, even if she laughs. I thought the wheel wanted one of those. I thought it wanted a piece of my future. I couldn't do that. I shook my head. The bells on my wrist chimed once, in a flat little sound like a warning. The short man cocked his head and said, refuse, and you walk empty-handed, and you will not be allowed to play the mirror. He said it sadly, like he was disappointed in a child. He looked at the crowd and they looked back with their bright eyes. I looked at Dara. She lined up her mouth like she was bracing for a slap. I said, fine, fine. Take a year off something I will never finish. He touched my wrist. There was a feeling like being very cold and very hot at the same time, like standing under a shower that can't decide its temperature. In that moment, I knew what I had traded. Not a big thing. Not a degree or a trip. I had traded the year I spent trying to write a novel when I was 19 and never got past chapter 5. It sounds minor. It was not. I loved that year even if it didn't produce anything. It was gone now, erased. I could still remember it, but it had the texture of a movie I watched once. It wasn't mine anymore. He handed me a token. It was heavy and warm. It had the wheel and the crown. I went back to my seat. My hands were shaking. I could feel the shape of that lost year in my head like a pulled tooth. He called 49, and Jake stumbled down with his usual swagger turned down low. He spun and got the hand. The short man took his right hand gently like a dance partner and pressed his thumb into the center of Jake's palm until a small bead of blood appeared. He said the carnival takes the hand that takes. Jake flinched but did not pull away. The bells chimed and he got a token. He wiped his palm on his jeans and came back up smiling too big. He whispered that it didn't hurt that much, and his eyes glittered like they always did when he lied. Brooke got the heart and cried for a full minute while the short man waited, patient as a bus stop. Then she whispered something into the spokes, something we couldn't hear, and the bells rang and she got her token. Dara spun and landed on the key. The short man leaned in so close they could have been whispering lovers. He said quietly, something about a door you should not open. She had to give up the memory of the moment she found that door and the desire to open it. She swayed on her feet, and for a second I thought she'd fall. She didn't. She got her token and came back and put her shoulder against mine. We sat with our 3 coins like kids hoarding arcade tokens. Round 3 was the mirror trade. He said, this is why you came. He said, this is what the mark is for. He said, the mirror gives, and the mirror takes. He said, you can buy back what you lost, if you can trade for it. They rolled out a big frame with a cloth over it. It was taller than a person, and wide enough for 3 to stand side by side. The cloth was black. The short man patted the cloth the way you pat a large animal to soothe it. He said those with tokens may approach. Offer your coin. Ask for what you want. If the mirror finds a fair trade, it will reflect it back. If the mirror thinks you are greedy, it will show you yourself. If the mirror thinks you are a liar, it will show you nothing. The first person went up. He was a man with a beard I recognized from the hardware store. He put his coin on the frame and said in a voice that shook, "I want my wife's ring back." The mirror stayed covered, but the cloth moved, like a wind passed behind it. The short man lifted one corner, and I saw a flash of a kitchen table. A hand. A ring slid off and lost down a vent. A fight that lasted an hour that lasted a year. The man held out his palm and the ring was there. He sobbed in a raw way. He did not look back when he left. A teenage girl went up and asked for a baby tooth she had saved and then lost when her dad moved out. The mirror gave it to her without a sound. A woman I didn't know asked for the last voicemail her mother left before she died. The mirror made her phone buzz. She played it and could not stand and sat in the sawdust while it finished. She handed her phone to the short man as if it was too heavy, and he passed it back to her with the care of a museum curator. Then a man with a blue baseball cap asked for time. He said he wanted the day back when his brother drowned. He said he would do something different. The short man tilted his head in a pitying way, and the bells on our wrists went flat again. He said the mirror doesn't do time like that. He said the mirror only returns what was taken, not what was given away. The man got angry, and the paper-faced people stopped smiling. He raised his voice. The short man touched the cloth, and the mirror reflected the river, smooth and brown, and the cap on the shore without a head to hold it. The man sat down without a coin, empty-handed. Our numbers were called in a staggered order that made no sense. I watched people go up and come down with little treasures clutched like baby birds. A dog tag, a recipe card, a key to a locker at a bus station. Then 47. I stood. My coin was heavy in my fist. My voice felt small, but I made myself say the name. I laid the token on the frame and asked for my cousin. The cloth rippled. It wasn't a breeze. It was a breathe. I felt it on my face. The short man didn't smile. He did not look surprised either. He said inside his throat, not with his mouth, "The mirror can't give you the living whole. It can give you a piece. It can give a door. It can give a map." He pressed my coin to the wood and said, "Trade is possible." Then he pulled the cloth back, and the mirror looked like any mirror until it didn't. At first it was me, tired and pale, bells on my wrist, stamp under my skin. Then it was a trailer interior, cheap paneling, a blue balloon animal tied to a chair, a calendar from 6 years ago, a hand with a small bite scar on the thumb. The camera angle tilted. I understood the mirror shows the thing itself, not a picture of the thing. You are looking through it to where it is. My coin sank half into the frame like it had always been part of it. My stomach turned because I understood the trade would not be simple. I said, "Show me more." The mirror showed a stack of flyers with the Night Bloom Carnival horse on them. It showed the inside of the funhouse face mouth, where the paint was new over old. It showed a trap door in the floor of the carousel booth. It showed a door with a crown carved into it. The door looked like painted wood, but when my eyes tried to focus, it looked like skin stretched taut. The short man put a finger to the cloth like he was shushing a child. He said, "Quiet. Let it talk." addressed me properly. He said the mirrors always ask for a trade. He said you give something, and they give something. He said for a person peace, the price is laughter. I said I don't have much of that. He said not yours, theirs. He pointed into the crowd, and the bells on a dozen wrists chimed. He said you have to gather it. He said the carousel helps, the wheel helps, the funhouse helps, but in the end, the mirror wants laughter you took from others. It wants the kind that sounds wrong even when it's real. He put his hand palm up. I felt sick. I understood the game. I understood why people came to the midnight show and why they looked hollow on their way out. I could have walked away. I want to believe that in a different version of me, I would have. In this version, I did not. I said, "What if I give you mine?" He looked pleased, like a teacher whose student has answered the first part of the question. He said we already took some. He meant the year of my failed novel. He meant the hour of childhood I spent making balloon dogs with my cousin at my aunt's kitchen table. I felt a weight shift inside my head, like a book sliding off a shelf and dropping out of sight. Dara's hand found mine again. She said, "I will help." Her voice shook only a little. Jake said me too, but when I looked at him, his eyes were bright like a raccoon's when it gets into a trash can and thinks it has found something amazing. Brooke did not speak. She looked like she had lost too much already. The short man nodded graciously like a maitre d' at a restaurant none of us could afford. He said, "Collect your laughter." He said the hour grows late. He said our carnival must bloom and then sleep. We went out together into the heat. The crowd thinned in my peripheral vision. Not less people, less definition. The paper-faced ones got clearer and the regular people got smudged. I heard the carousel breathe. The Ferris wheel clicked in a slow, eager way. The funhouse mouth was open wide. Somewhere in the dark, the calliope turned its melody inside out. I am not going to give you a blow-by-blow of what we did because I don't want to make it into a guide. I don't want anyone to try. I will tell you enough so you understand what it took and why it cost what it did. We started at the carousel. There was a boy there who could not have been older than 12. He had one of the small goats. It looked bigger in his arms than the one Dara carried. He wanted to ride the gold horse with the red ribbon, because that horse always looks faster. I asked if I could trade him rides. He asked what for. I said for the goat. He laughed a sharp laugh like a cough, and I felt it brush the bells on my wrist. I put my token hand on the horse's poll. The horse's ear turned back toward me. I told the boy a dumb joke from elementary school. He laughed again, real this time. The bells chimed. The horse snapped at my sleeve and I jerked my arm back before it took a piece. The boy didn't see that part. I saw the marker on his wrist flare and fade. I saw the line under his skin where the stamp had set in. He rode and got off in time, and I never saw him again after that, which is probably a mercy. We stood by the ring toss and said the kinds of things you say to each other to make yourselves laugh when you are trying too hard. You think it sounds fake. If you do it long enough, it stops sounding fake. It turns into another kind of laugh, chemical and metallic, the kind the mirror wanted. I felt the bells drink it. I felt my cheeks hurt. I felt myself tilt sideways in my own head, like my skull had been hung on a nail and was slowly coming down. We went to the Ferris wheel, and I said I hated heights, and Jake said I was a baby, and I called him a raccoon, and he laughed so hard he had to sit on the curb and cough. We got on and went up. The town looked different from up there. The lights of the carnival reflected in the school windows across the road like eyes. The houses on Maple looked like Monopoly pieces. When we stopped near the top, the music cut out for a breath, and the only sound was the wheels' metal settling. I said my cousin's name out loud like a prayer. The wind moved the hair on my forehead. Dara squeezed my hand and whispered into my shoulder, a story about sneaking into the pool at the apartment complex after midnight when she was 15. She laughed at herself. I laughed for real. I thought if the mirror wants this kind of laughter, it can have every last piece as long as it gives me something back. We stuffed our pockets with it. That is the best way to say it. The bells drank and our stamps pulsed. I felt hungover without ever touching a drink. We went back to the main tent when the air changed again, and the generators got louder in a way that felt like a growl. The short man stood at the frame with the cloth. He looked pleased. He rubbed his hands together like he was warming them. He said, well. He said, you have enough for a question. He picked up a little brass funnel that had been sitting in the sawdust. He held out his hand. I held out mine. The bells on my ribbon bracelet were silent for once. He tipped them toward the funnel. There was no sound, but a cold feeling ran across my wrist like water. The funnel steamed like dry ice when you pour something warm over it. He slid it under the cloth and the mirror made a small sigh. He said, ask. Do not beg. Do not bargain. Ask like you know what you're owed. It was the strangest advice. I said it anyway. I said, where is my cousin? I said his name like you say a word to wake someone. The cloth rippled. The mirror showed the trailer again, a different angle, closer to the floor. It showed a pile of toys that looked stolen from a dozen different fairs over a dozen years. It showed the door with the crown. It showed a kid's shoe, blue with a light-up sole. It showed a gold-eyed goat with one missing eye. I said, how do I open the door? The short man said, trade. I said, I have given you everything. He said, not everything. He nodded at the stuffed goat Dara carried. He said some doors only open if you give back what you think you won. He meant the prize. He meant more than the prize. He meant the feeling we had when we thought we had beat the game. I took the goat from Dara. It was warm like an animal. I don't know how else to put it. It had weight, and the crown pressed into my palm like a thorny vine. I walked to the frame. I did not want to do it. I did it anyway. I lifted the goat and pressed it against the cloth. It went through like the cloth was smoke. My fingers brushed something that felt like the inside of a mouth. I jerked back and saw my hand was wet. The cloth was wet too, and a little pink. I swallowed and said, open. The frame glowed a little from within. The bells on everyone's wrists chimed. The short man looked delighted the way a storm looks delighted when it knocks down a tree. The cloth fell away. The mirror was not a mirror anymore. It was a space, not a tunnel, not exactly a doorway. It was a space where you could step and be somewhere else. The paper-faced people leaned forward greedily. The regular people leaned back. The short man bowed and said, be quick. He said our bloom is brief. I don't think Jake wanted to go through. Brooke definitely did not. Dara did. I did. We went. The space felt like cold honey. It dragged. It let go. We were in a trailer that smelled like old cigarettes and laundry that never completely dried. The air was too still. My eyes took a second to adjust. There was a little kitchenette with a dented pot. There were pictures taped to the wall that had been cut from magazines and flyers. There was the blue balloon dog, now soft and wrinkled with the last of its air. There was the door with the crown. It was real and not real. It was wood, and it was flesh, and it was painted, and it was raw. The crown symbol sunk in and out like a slow breath. Something moved behind the door, not a person. A sound like a big animal shifting in sleep. A click like a latch being tested. I reached for the handle and felt the worst kind of wrong. The kind that wakes you up at night certain someone is standing beside your bed. I said his name again. I said, "Please, come on. We have to go." A voice answered from under the table. It was small and hoarse and older than it should have been. He crawled out. He looked like himself, except if you held his picture up to a mirror made of water. He was taller. His face had the long, thin look of a kid who's not getting enough sun. He had a scar on his thumb that matched the one I'd seen in the mirror. He didn't look surprised. He said, "You took long enough, like we had agreed to meet here." I had a million things to say. I said one. I said, "I am sorry." He shrugged like it wasn't my fault, and like it was, and like he didn't have the energy for either. The door with the crown bulged. The crown lifted and lowered like a pulse. I grabbed his hand. His skin was cold. Dara grabbed my arm. I heard the short man's voice through the nowhere space. He said, "Be quick." He sounded amused, not afraid for us. That made me angry in a clean way. Anger is sharp. Fear is heavy. The anger helped me move. We went back through the space. It felt harder the second time, like it didn't want us. The bells on our wrists scraped my skin. The mirror spit us into the sawdust. The crowd made a sound like tide on rocks. Some clapped. Some hissed. The paper-faced people watched with bright eyes and small mouths. The short man bowed like a gentleman in a court. He had a coin in his hand that he rolled over his knuckles. He looked at my cousin with a greedy softness, like a cat looking at a bird through a window. He said, "The door will notice it is lighter." He said, "You should run now." We did. No plan, no grand exit. We ran. We ran past the rows of games and rides. We ran past the funhouse mouth which opened wider as we passed and showed a tongue that was not a tongue. We ran under the Ferris wheel where the seats swung like pendulums. We ran toward the gate, and the woman in the tailcoat was there again, Mara or her twin or her copy, and she held out her arms as if she wanted a hug. She said in this sweet voice, "You forgot to exchange your bells for your exit prize." I shoved past her and felt something sharp brush my side, and the fabric of my shirt stuck to my skin. The gate was right there. It was not closed, but it felt closed, the way a dream door feels closed when your hands are useless. Jake and Brooke were right behind us, and the crowd pressed the way crowds press when a show lets out, and everyone thinks they are the only one in a hurry. The calliope hit a key, and then another, and then fell apart, and then caught itself. The lights on the Ferris wheel went from red to white. The carousel horses lifted their hooves, everyone at the same time, and I heard the clatter clear as a line of soldiers drilling. The funhouse mirrors sang again, deeper, like a big glass throat clearing. The air smelled like copper and apples fake enough to make your tongue numb. The gate gave when I shoved. not because of my strength, but because it decided to. That is how it felt anyway. We burst onto the gravel lot, into the normal dark, where the street lights were orange, and the bugs threw themselves at the bulbs, because that's what bugs do. The music cut off like a cord had been yanked from a wall. The sudden quiet made my ears ring. We didn't stop running until we were in the baseball field, tripping over the low fence, scraping our shins, falling, getting up, running again. We collapsed in the grass, gasping like fish, and it was so quiet except for our breathing and a train horn far away. When I looked back, the fairgrounds looked like nothing. The tents were dark. The Ferris wheel was a silhouette against the stars. You could tell yourself it never lit up in the first place if you wanted. My cousin lay on his back with his eyes closed. If he was faking to be funny, it wasn't a good joke. He opened them slowly and looked at me like he was trying very hard to connect the person he saw with a picture he remembered. He said my name like he was testing if it still fit. He said, "Is Aunt Jana mad?" I said yes, and laughed and then cried, and then could not stop doing both for a minute. Jake sat with his back to the fence and stared across the field. Brooke shook, silent. Dara rested her forehead to my shoulder and stayed like that until the bugs moved from the lights to us, because we were the warm things out there. We did not call the cops. I know that sounds stupid. We should have. It would have been the normal thing. Here is the thing. What would we say? We went to a carnival and paid laughter to a mirror that opened a door in a trailer that had a living door. We stole a boy back from a place with rules written in a language you feel with your teeth. We ran. We didn't pay for our exit prize. The cops in our town are fine people as far as they go. This was not their job. Instead, we drove my cousin to my aunt's house, which is in the next county now. We banged on her door at 2 a.m. She turned on the porch light with terror on her face, because that is what porch lights are for past midnight. When she saw him, she made a sound I've only heard once, which is that night. It was like her voice was an animal that was afraid to come out and then did anyway. She held him until he squirmed and told her he needed to pee. He had been gone 6 years. He was not 6 years older. He was older, yes. He was also the same. He would say later that the days were long and the nights were longer, and sometimes they were the same. He would say that he drew pictures on the walls of the trailer until the paper-faced people came and took the walls away and gave him new ones to draw on. He would say that the lady with the hat let him eat as many mini donuts as he wanted when he was good and none when he asked about the door. He would say that the door sang to him, not with words. He would ask where the dog was, even though the family dog had died 3 years before, and we would lie and say sleeping, because a lie can be a kindness for 1 hour. He would say the carnival only blooms where people are already hungry. I slept a couple hours on my aunt's couch and woke up to the smell of coffee and someone crying quietly in the kitchen. I went home with my clothes sticky and my head a cement block. The stamp under my right wrist was a faint outline now, like an old scar. The ribbon with the bells was gone. There was a scab on my side where the woman at the gate had grabbed me. It was shaped like a little crown if you looked at it sideways. That morning I drove back to the fairgrounds because I needed to see it in daylight. There was trash in the grass where the ticket booth had been, a few napkins and a plastic fork and a crushed lemon shake cup. There were tracks from the wheels where the rides had been dragged out. The Ferris wheel frame was gone. The carousel platform was gone. The main tent was gone. The only sign that it had been there at all was a faint smell of hot sugar and diesel, and something sour, and a pile of sawdust that the wind had already pushed into a shallow drift. A goat crown lay half buried in it, plastic, cheap, cracked in one place. I did not touch it. I have looked into the Night Bloom Carnival since then. I haven't found much. A newspaper clipping from 30 years ago about a carnival fire 2 towns over. An old forum thread with dead links where someone swore the mirrors made them taller. A Facebook photo from a woman I don't know. A carousel horse with a ribbon around its neck and something wrong with the eyes. But the comments are just friends saying cute. The worst part is the posters. I see them sometimes. Not on walls, not mailed to anyone. They show up in places like a flyer under my windshield wiper when I'm parked at the grocery store. They show up in my mailbox without a stamp. They show up on my phone in the random photos folder, as if I took a picture of a poster I never saw. The horse on the poster always looks a little different each time, as if someone is carving it while I sleep. If you're wondering what happened to Jake and Brooke and Dara, the answer is they are here, and they are not. Jake still makes jokes like raccoons make messes. He laughs too much, and sometimes he laughs when nothing is funny, and sometimes he laughs when a joke is sad. Sometimes he doesn't laugh at all for days, like he is waiting for permission. Brooke changed her hair and changed jobs and moved to a different apartment, and says she doesn't think about it. But I saw the little heart over her wrist fade, and come back once when we were sitting in traffic, and the sun hit her skin right. Dara is still around. She drops by with coffee. She stands in my kitchen and leans on the counter and looks at the lines in my face like she is memorizing them. We went to the lake last week and sat on the dock and didn't say anything for a long time. And then she said, "I don't want to open any doors I can't close." I said, "Me neither." We sat there until the sun went down and the bugs started to bite, and it felt almost like the before time. Except I know better now. There isn't a before and an after. There is only the line you cross, and the things you carry back with you. As for my cousin, I won't write details. They are his. He is okay in all the normal ways. He is not okay sometimes in the quiet ways. Loud noises don't bother him. Mirrors do. He won't walk past the carnival section in a store. He won't step on a painted line shaped like a wheel. He says please and thank you to doors. He draws carousel horses with their eyes closed. He asked if he could go back once, and I said no. And he didn't ask again. I think the carnival will come back. The stamp on my wrist itches sometimes in the middle of the night, and when I look down in the dark, I can see the faint outline of the wheel and the crown. In my closet, there is a box with things I do not look at. A folded black ribbon with tiny bells that do not ring anymore. A gold token that should not exist because I traded it. And yet there it was in my jacket pocket the next morning. A paper program with round brown fingerprints on the edges that are not mine. Sometimes I hear the calliope under other music, like my neighbor practicing piano, or a kid playing a video on their phone as they walk past my window. It never changes, that steady count of 10. I try not to match my steps to it when I walk. I try not to count on my teeth. People ask me if I would do it again. I could say no and sound healthy. I could say yes and sound haunted. The truth is, we do things under rules we don't get to write. I know how to play their game now. I know what prizes cost. If the air in our town goes sweet and sour again, and the posters show up in places no one put them, I will count to 10 and go anyway. I won't bring anyone who can't stand to see how the painted smiles work. If you go, and I hope you don't, remember a few things. The carousel is hungry. Get off before the music stops. The wheel takes the hand that takes. Never beg the mirror. Ask like you know your worth. Don't take the big prize because it was never meant to be in your arms in the first place. If a child in a mirror points, follow, but never trust a reflection that moves first. If a woman in a tailcoat tries to tie a ribbon round your wrist, let her tie it loose. It might help later. It might not. The rules change, but the shape of them doesn't. The carnival blooms where the ground is thin and the people are hungry. It doesn't need a field. It only needs a list of names and a handful of coins and a line of mirrors cleaned until they can sing. It only needs you to look at yourself and laugh at the wrong time. That's the easiest part. Last thing. Do not bring home the goat. If you already did, put it outside your door at night with the crown turned upside down and your watch set for dawn. If it is inside again in the morning, get rid of the door. I am not joking. Put up a curtain and let the wall be a wall. The door will hold a grudge if you are slow. If you think this is all a story I have been working on, fine. If that helps you sleep, hold it like a cheap stuffed animal. I still have to sleep anyway. When I do, I dream about a trailer where the walls are paper until they're not, and a door with a crown that never opens unless you feed it, and a mirror that knows your name even if you've never said it out loud. On good nights, I dream I won a small prize at the ring toss and gave it to a kid who laughed and ran off and forgot to say thank you. On bad nights, I dream I took the goat home and it watched me brush my teeth and it blinked slow. And when I turned around, my reflection in the bathroom mirror had already left the room. I wake up and check my wrist for the stamp, and it's never there until it is. I tell myself the music is just in my head. That is usually enough. But sometimes, in the quiet right before sleep, I taste sugar and rust, and the bells chime once somewhere you can't point to. And that is when I know the carnival is closer than it sounds, and the line between here and there is only as thick as a breath. The week after we ran, someone taped a new poster to the door of the abandoned feed store. No one saw who did it. The horse on it had eyes that looked like mirrors. The date said, 1 week only, starting September 1st, which had already passed. People laughed and said someone was bad at math. I didn't laugh. I took it down and put it in the box in my closet with the ribbon and the coin. I am writing this because I think the box is not enough. I am writing it to put it somewhere outside my house, outside my town, outside the path of the next bloom. If it reads like I am talking to my best friend, that's because I am. If you read this and shrug, that's fine. If you read it and feel the small hairs on your arm lift, listen, not to me, to your own feet on the ground. Count. Keep your steps off the 10. Keep your laughter for people who trade you theirs back. If you smell sugar with a sour edge and can't find the vendor, turn around. And if you hear a voice like a barker say those with the mark, do not look at your wrist. Keep walking. The gate is always there if you keep your head steady. The carnival likes to eat people who turn around. It is less interested in people who leave without looking. That's the only rule I'm sure of. And even then, I am not sure at all. But I am sure of this. When the carnival leaves, it doesn't take everything. It leaves the little things that didn't taste good. It leaves a crown in the sawdust. It leaves a ring caught on a bolt. It leaves a goat eye in the grass. It leaves a laugh behind your teeth that isn't yours, and sometimes leaks out when you are alone. If you find any of that, don't touch it. Don't bring it home. Don't try to play without the rules. If you have to do anything, burn it on a metal tray outside and walk away before the smell becomes something you recognize. You asked for a carnival horror story. I gave you the one I lived. Maybe that is all a story is anyway. You pay with pieces of yourself. You hope the mirror gives you back something worth the trade. You hope when the music stops, your horse is already stepping down. You hope the bells stay quiet. You hope the door forgets your name. You hope and you hope. And then the night blooms, and all that hoping is just another kind of game. I'm not the kind of guy who spooks easy. I grew up outside a small town where your summer evenings were either spent at the baseball diamond or down at somebody's pond with a cooler and a couple rods. I've worked night shifts for years. I've driven through whiteouts. I've cleaned deer at 2 a.m. behind a barn with coyotes yipping in the tree line. I don't jump at shadows, but I won't fish at night anymore. This started with a buddy of mine, Dale. He's the kind of friend you end up with if you hang around after high school and work with your hands. He's a roofer, jokes a lot, eats whatever you put in front of him. He's not a liar and not dramatic. That's important. Because anytime I tell this story, people think there's no way a normal guy would keep going after the first weird thing. But when it happens in real time, it sneaks up on you slow. You cook up a reason for each strange bit. You find a way to keep the boat pointed toward normal. Dale and I had been trying to plan a night catfishing run for weeks. I'd gotten this used aluminum boat off a guy from my cousin's shop. Nothing fancy. A 14-footer with a little outboard that coughed to life if you coaxed it. 2 bench seats, and a trolling motor that drained a battery faster than it should. It had a yellowed spotlight duct taped to the bow. Real classy, but it floated, and it was ours. We'd taken it to the county lake a couple times and caught bluegill like we were cheating. Dale said, "Let's try the damn reservoir. Big cats in there. I know this old dry creek channel where they stack like cordwood. The dam reservoir is where all our problems go and sit under 10 or 15 feet of water. When they flooded it in the 70s, they didn't clear everything. There's a rumor about a farm road that goes right under. Fence posts still standing like a row of rotten teeth. I'd heard guys talk about trolling walleye and getting snagged on a mailbox. And then there was this story that floats around if you get anyone talking toward the bottom of a bottle, that the old cemetery got moved, but some of it didn't. Headstones got moved, sure. Bodies? Maybe not. I figured that was the usual. They paved over the burial ground scare talk you get in any town. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't jump into my head once or twice when we were out there on foggy mornings. Anyway, the plan was to head out about an hour before sunset, motor across to the mouth of a creek that fed the reservoir, set up on that drop-off, and sit tight while the big cats turned on after dark. Simple. I packed heavy lead because the current there is sneaky. I had 50-pound braid on both rods, big circle hooks, a baggie full of pre-tied leaders with 5 0 hooks, and a couple bell clips for the rod tips. Dale brought a bucket of cut shad that smelled like low tide in hell, a 6-pack, and his old Coleman lantern that hisses like a snake when it's lit. Between us, we figured we had enough gear to pull up something with whiskers and a grudge. We launched from the public ramp as the light was getting flat. You know that last hour of color where everything goes soft and the water looks like brushed pewter? That. There were a few bass boats coming in, and a dad with 2 kids dragging a stringer that clinked against the ramp, bluegills flashing silver in the dull light. The wind was nothing. The whole reservoir had this skin on it, like a sleeping animal. We pointed the bow at the far shore and puttered across. Dale, who laughs at everything, quieted down on the ride. He was steering and staring dead ahead. I asked what his deal was, and he said, "You ever notice how flat it feels over here? Like the air? Like when you walk into an empty gym or a funeral home. That carpet dead sound." I told him he was being dramatic, and he grinned and shook it off. But I knew what he meant. The reservoir is weird. It sits in a bowl of hills, and the trees on those hills are kind of short and knotty, like they're stunted. Highway lights from the bridge at the west end would glow on low clouds, in a way that never matched up with what your eyes told you the sky really looked like. The water smelled different too. Not like algae. It smelled like pennies. We reached the creek mouth, if you can call it that. It's really just a gentle V in a clay bank, where runoff is tugging at the edge of the reservoir. You can't see current on a calm evening, but if you toss a little stick in, you'll watch it drift like a bug on a lazy conveyor. We dropped anchor just off the drop-off. The depth finder said 14 feet. I could feel the anchor drag a foot or two, then bite. We set up like we've done 100 times. I tied a sliding sinker rig. Dale tied a 3-way swivel like he always does, even though I tell him it's overkill. We baited with hunks of shad that were more bone than meat. He lit the lantern and hung it on the middle seat. The hiss filled the boat. I clipped the bells on our rod tips and propped them in the holders. The whole thing settled into that waiting rhythm. Lantern hiss, a moth pinging occasionally against the glass, the soft tick-tick of wavelets on aluminum. I remember thinking I could fall asleep sitting there. The last of the daylight drained out of the west. The hills went from dark green to black cutouts. Across the water, a heron made this croaking sound like someone was raking a chair across concrete. Then the bells chimed, little polite taps, like someone asking to come in. Dale's rod bowed. He didn't grab it right away, because with circle hooks you want the fish to load it, not rip it. The tip dipped again, more definite. He picked it up, let it bend down, and then just leaned back and started reeling. "It's a good one," he said, and I believed him. You can tell by the way the weight shifts in the boat. Your body starts to compensate. Your feet push against the gut of the boat a little to counter the pull. The line thrummed like a tight guitar string. I brought my rod inside and got the net ready. The fight was honest. The fish was stubborn, but not head-shaking hard. It came up slow in a circle. I dipped the net, and we lifted a fat, yellow-brown catfish over the gunnel. 8 pounds, maybe 10. We cut the line at the mouth rather than wrestle with the hook. The fish thumped the bottom of the boat with that heavy, oily sound, and then it slid into the live well with a splash. We whooped, and I cracked one of the beers. We logged it mentally as a good sign. "They're moving," Dale said. We rebaited, cast again, and settled. That's the last normal thing that happened. I don't know how long it was before the bells went off again. Time gets strange around lantern light. It might have been 5 minutes, might have been 40. But when it happened, both tips started nodding at once. Not violent. Again, those little polite taps, like something curious was tasting the bait with careful lips. We did the same thing. Waited, leaned back, started reeling. But this time, no weight. It felt like hauling in a kite, like reeling through weeds. I thought maybe the bait was picked clean by little peckers, the way bluegill will strip a worm right down the shank if you give them half a chance. I pulled mine up and swore. The bait was still on, but stepped into it like it had been mashed flat. Dale made a face and held his up. Same thing. The shad pieces looked pressed paper thin, not torn, compressed. He laughed it off, but it was a short, weird laugh, and he didn't say anything. We put on fresh, cast again. The bells ticked. We waited. Nothing. I reeled up 5 minutes later and found the new bait smashed in the same way, like it had been pinched between plates. I touched it, and it came apart in fine, uniform flakes, like it had been freeze-dried and then swatted. "Snails," Dale said. "Those big ones that come up at night. They'll crush bait like that." Maybe. But I've fished this place since I was a kid, and I've never pulled up bait that looked like a book left out in rain and then ironed. I said that, and he shrugged and rebaited. Then something bumped the hull. Not a big deal at first. Carp do that. Turtles do that. I've had logs thump under a boat hard enough to make you check for a hole. This was a little pat, like a hand on a shoulder. Then another one. I put my palm flat on the side and felt a small vibration. Then another, evenly spaced. "You feel that?" I asked. "Wind chop," he said without looking. But there wasn't any wind. The water was a mirror around us, black as asphalt, with only the lantern making a little oval of gold around the boat. A third bump. A bigger one. Not a hit. Not a thunk. It had give to it, like a living thing pressing against us. "Log drifting," Dale said. But he looked over the side when he said it. That's when we heard the voice. That's the part where people stop me and say, "Okay, now you're messing with me." It wasn't a shout. It was a voice like when you're a kid and your mom calls you from another room, and you hear it but you can't catch the words. Female. Soft. Far away and close at the same time. A little rise on the end like a question. Just the pattern of speech without the content. I looked at Dale. He looked at me. We both went still like deer hearing a leaf fall. "Anyone out here?" I called. My voice sounded stupid and loud. The hills threw it back at me too fast, like someone repeated it a half-second early. "Hey," Dale said, quieter. He stood up. The boat rocked. He cupped his hands around his mouth and said, "You okay?" No answer. Not for a long beat. Then that same tone, the same little rise, the same female not quite word, like a record of a voice, scratched up, playing only the shape of the sentence. "We don't get a lot of pranks on that reservoir. It's not that kind of place. There aren't frat kids cruising around after dark. There's the occasional bow fisherman with a light rig, the hum of a motor working a line, and that's about it." But this felt like someone messing with us. It felt like somebody on shore behind the brush, calling from the throat while smiling into their sleeve. Dale reached for the spotlight on the bow. The duct tape made that gummy ripping sound as he wiped at it with his thumb. He flicked the switch. The light threw a dirty cone across the water and bleached the clay bank. Nothing. He swung it right, left, up the creek mouth to the right. Just mud cracks and weeds and those stunted trees that looked like men hunched under coats. "Hello?" I called again, angling my voice so it didn't bounce off the hills. And again the shape of a woman's voice, farther and closer at once, like it was under my feet. It wasn't coming from the shore. It wasn't bouncing off the water. It was against the aluminum. The rod bells rang like someone had flicked them with fingernails, both at the same time. The tips bowed down, both at the same time. Not a hit, a steady pull, like a hand gathering rope. "Reel!" Dale barked, and we both grabbed for our rods. But when I planted and leaned back, there was no bend, no fight, just dead, heavy weight, like a sack of sand. For a second, I thought we'd snagged. That's common on the reservoir. They left all kinds of trash in there, fences and stumps. But this was weird, because we'd both snagged the same thing at the same time, and the line was coming off my reel steady, not like it was pinging and grinding across something. I tightened the drag. The line kept leaving, perfectly even, like the spool was mounted to a motor. Dale swore. He tried to horse us in. He's not gentle with gear. His rod bowed tight and then released. Not a snap, not a recoil, just a sag. He reeled all the way in and held up the end. The hook was gone. Not broken, not straightened. Gone. The knot was still neat and perfect, a little clover shape. Something had cut it like it had been scissored with one clean snip. My line stopped leaving. It held tight for a second like a dog at the end of a leash, then came back to me slack. I reeled in. My hook? Same thing. Neat knot, nothing on it. Not frayed, not chewed. Cut. The lantern hissed behind us. The voice did its little rise and fall, the shape of words that weren't quite there. I could feel Dale thinking the same thing I was thinking. Knives. There are gar in that reservoir, sure. There are snapping turtles big as manhole covers. There's trash, broken glass, rebar. But it was a clean cut. It was the same length on both our leaders, like someone measured and snipped. I retied the hook. I've tied thousands of knots in my life. This one, my hands didn't want to do it. My fingers were slick with fish smell, and the line felt greasy. I tied it okay, tested it, baited with a piece of shad bigger than my palm just to say screw you to whatever was playing. We cast. The bells waited. The voice made its shape. The hull had another gentle pat, like a neighbor knocking through a thin apartment wall. "Let's move," I said. Dale nodded too fast. We pulled the anchor. It came up clean, no weeds. I stowed it. Dale went to start the outboard, and the motor gave this coughing whine but didn't catch. He did the thing you do. Tilt it, squeeze the bulb, check the vent on the gas tank, pull the cord like you're angry at it. Nothing. Not even a pop. The trolling motor could get us out of there, but barely, and the battery was already at half, which means more like a third. We'd be that slow-motion duck crawling across the flat, a mile an hour. I said screw it, start trolling. He did. We swung wide of the creek mouth, pointing toward the middle where the main channel ran. The lantern hissed on, the only light we had besides the spotlight and a fingernail of moon peeking between low clouds. The water out there looks different, even at night. It looks like it goes down farther. The hills fell back into shadow, and the bridge lights turned into 3 little orange stars that blinked in the corner of your eye. The bell on my rod chirped, then Dale's, then the hull pat, pat, pat like something counting. Same distance between each one, same amount of pressure. We didn't pick up the rods. We didn't say anything. I never thought I'd be scared of fishing bells. But that night I felt like they were door chimes in an empty store. "Kill the lantern," I said, for no reason except that the light was starting to feel like it drew something instead of keeping it away. Dale reached up and turned the knob. The hiss died down slow, then fast. It made that last little burp sound, and everything went big and dark. The moon was behind clouds again. We had nothing but the buzzing of the trolling motor and my breathing sounding too loud in my own head. In that dark, I felt the boat tilt just an inch. Not a big wobble. A lean. Like someone had put their palm on the side of the boat and pushed down with their weight. And now they were just holding it like that, steady and patient. Water touched the rubber boots around the live well lid. "Light," I said. My voice sounded like someone else's. Dale fumbled for the spotlight and hit the switch. The cone flashed out. It hit nothing and then too much. Overexposed water, then a gray log, then clay bank, then water again. He swung it carefully around on the downwind side, as if we knew there was a downwind, as if wind mattered at all. He swept it toward where the boat was leaning. Here's the thing I didn't know until that exact second. You can see a shape in water that doesn't belong even before your brain knows what it is. Something in you says wrong. Wrong. Wrong before you have edges and corners to name. The light hit the surface and made this highway stripe across little waves. Something just under rippled wrong. The water looked thicker there. It moved different. Slow where it should have been quick. Quick where it should have been slow. He held the light steady. I leaned over to look because I didn't want to. And if I didn't make myself, I was scared I would freeze up. The cone reached down maybe 3 feet. That's all you get on a night like that. It showed us 2 feet of something pale like clay, too smooth to be wood, too regular to be rock. It had an edge that wasn't an edge, a cliff face that wasn't a cliff, just the impression of an outline pressed into water. Along that something, attached to it, dangled a length of moss or weed or maybe twine that had a knot in it every inch or so. The knots were tight little balls that looked like, this is stupid, like the knots my grandpa used to put in trot line droppers. Evenly spaced, measured, practical. The knots moved, no current. They just made a little lifting motion in a sequence, one after the other, like fingers drumming on a tabletop. The boat leaned another inch. I grabbed the spotlight from Dale. I feel bad about that. I basically ripped it out of his hands. I put the beam down in the water where I'd seen those knots. They vanished into black. I hit the switch with my thumb to try to get the high beam, then the low, then the high again. Stupid. The light went out completely. The switch jammed. My thumb slipped. I tried to fix it and realized my hands were shaking and slick, and I couldn't get enough friction to work the little plastic slider. The boat tilted a 1/3 inch. Water sloshed in. I heard the fish thump once in the live well. The voice made its shape right below my feet, a sigh with a question mark. "Throw it," Dale said, hoarse. I didn't know what he meant. "The anchor," he said. "Throw the anchor." I did. I pitched the anchor over the side toward where the boat was leaning. That sounds dumb now. Like, why would you tie yourself to whatever was there? But in that second, it made sense. We've all grabbed for a doorknob when someone jammed it into us from the other side. You want something to bind to. The anchor rope hissed over the gunwale. It paid out fast, too fast. I realized I hadn't tied it off to the cleat. I had a loose end in my hand and nothing else. The weight took it. It whipped my palm and burned it and took skin with it like cheese off a pizza. I reflexively closed on it, and then I was hanging onto the tail of a snake that wanted what it wanted. It pulled. The rope dug in. I made this noise I didn't know I could make, and I fell forward onto my knees on the aluminum ribs of the boat. The hull leaned so far it felt like one more inch would put us over. My hand smoked. The rope cut deeper. Dale grabbed me around the chest with both arms and hauled backward. He hooked one leg under the bench and one under the side, so we made a human anchor. The rope gave a fraction and then tightened. It didn't jerk like a fish. It didn't head shake. It moved like something turning away with a prize in its teeth, slow and certain, and it drew a long streak of water up from the side of the boat that was as smooth as glass. It didn't make a wave. It didn't splash. It pulled a long, flat piece of water like it was peeling up vinyl flooring. Then it let go. Not all the way. The pressure didn't stop. It just stopped pulling. The rope went slack, then tight, then slack, like someone was praying with beads. I ripped my hand back and it tore skin in two neat lines. The rope fell into the bottom of the boat like a live thing and lay there, leaking little threads. I don't remember tying it down to the cleat, but I must have, because later it was tied. I remember hearing my own breath and the little bells on the rods jangling again, polite as ever. I remember the lantern clicking when I tried to relight it and nothing happening, the pump in the live well ticking, the little motor buzz. "Batteries at a quarter," Dale said. I think he meant the trolling motor, or maybe he meant the lantern. I don't know. He sounded like all the spit had been pulled out of his mouth. "Keep it moving," I said, and the dumbness hit me then, because we weren't moving. I could hear the trolling motor buzzing aft, but I could feel that we were stuck in place, like the boat had grown a keel and jammed it into a crack in the world. The voice went up at the end again, a question tone. Then it made a new shape, a little laugh. Just the rhythm of one, like someone imitating the outline of a chuckle without any humor in it. No air from lungs, no joy. Imagine tapping out the pattern of a laugh on a table with a pencil. "We're leaving," Dale said out loud, as if it mattered to something that would care about permission. I reached for my phone. I know what that sounds like, but people record everything. If I'd gotten it on video, it would make this whole thing less of a story and more of a file you could point to. The problem is, I had one bar the whole way across that reservoir, and now I had none. The screen lit my face. It made a little circle of blue light on my hands. It showed me my palm, skinned and weeping. It showed me the smears I'd left on the aluminum. It showed me the refraction of water beads on the gunwale, all perfect little fish eyes. It showed me, for half a second before the screen dimmed, a shadow under the boat, a long, soft shape that had a lot of the wrong angles for an animal, and none of them consistent, like it was all elbows. I think it was just the light messing with me. I think it was my mind putting bones where there were only weeds. I tell myself that. I shoved the phone into my pocket. I picked up a rod because there wasn't anything else to pick up. I cut the bell off the tip with my thumbnail and flicked it into the live well without meaning to. For some reason, the idea of that bell ringing anymore felt like a violation. Like if I let it play that little chime one more time, I'd be inviting something to step into our house. I cranked my reel to make sure it was tight. The bait was on. The line vibrated so faint I could feel it in my teeth more than my fingers. I squinted out into the water and saw nothing but a flat patch where the light from the bridge bled a line into the dark. I cast into it. The second my weight hit the water, the line stopped midair. Not when it splashed. Not when it sank. Midair. Like someone had caught the line between two fingers and pinched it mid-cast. The rod jerked. I didn't add to the motion. It already had motion. It pulled my shoulder forward. I made this ugly NH sound and set my feet and leaned back, but the force was sideways and down, so all I did was slide a 1/4 inch and bang my hip on the bench. "Cut it," Dale said, voice quiet and sharp. I didn't. I don't know why. Maybe because I paid for that rod, because I tied that hook, because the only thing I had control over in that second was the feel of tension in the blank. I think some small idiot piece of me just wanted to understand what was on the other end. So I didn't cut. I did the opposite. I palmed the spool to add drag. And that was the only time that night that whatever it was acknowledged me with more than a question mark. It didn't surge. It didn't whip. It just straightened me. Not pulled me. Straightened me. It corrected the curve of my spine and my elbows, so I was aligned from the top of my head to my ankles. And in that perfect straightening, I felt like a kid with a parent flattening the wrinkles from my shirt before school. I hit the line with my knife. It popped and made this little sad twang. The cut end sprang back and slithered, and the other end stayed in my hand longer than it should have. Just a fraction of a second, like there was more line than air would allow. Then it was gone. Dale didn't do anything with his rod. He stared down at the floor for a long moment. Then he bent and gripped the little trolling motor handle and turned it left, then right, then left. The head moved. The boat didn't. He killed it and started it again. He did that a few times, like someone turning a key in a dead car to make sure it's really dead. Then he unbolted the little clamp on the transom and lifted the whole thing into the boat, battery 2, set it down and said, "Okay." "Okay what?" I said. My voice sounded calm. That's a thing I remember. The stupid, calm voice that didn't belong to me. "We're lighter now," he said. "If it wants weight, it can take the damn motor and the battery and not us with it." There was a logic to that. Not a good logic, but a logic. I nodded. I stood up very slow and unshipped the anchor line from the cleat. I didn't throw it. I just held it. The pressure on it was on, off, counting beads. Still. I looped it. I thought about tying it to something tender, my own wrist. And then my brain spit that thought out like a seed. The voice sighed a shape under my feet, and then, for the first time, changed. It made a longer sound, a sentence-length sound, if it had words. It had a rhythm I knew the way you know your mother's voice through a door. I couldn't make out any syllables. I couldn't understand the content, but I knew the kind of sentence. It was a story tone, a "you'll never believe what happened" tone, a "do you remember that day" tone. The voice wasn't an imitation of sound anymore. It was an imitation of relation. That hit me harder than the pushing on the hull. My body had been reacting like a dog reacts to a storm. My mind's edges had been holding. When the voice pretended to be familiar, something in me bent in a new direction. It made me want to lean toward it. I knelt and put my ear to the aluminum bench, because that seemed like the most natural thing in the world. I don't know what I expected. Listening for fish? Listening for weather? I pressed my ear on the spot where the bench met the rib, and I could feel the vibration. It wasn't random. It had an up and down. It had an inhale. It had a little chuckle in the middle. It was nothing like human breath. It made my ear bones itch. I got angry. It came out of nowhere. Maybe because being scared for that long burns out the part of you that can hold nothing but fear. Maybe because having the shape of my life mimicked pissed me off. I got mad like I hadn't been mad in years, and I said, loud and stupid, "Stop it." The bench stopped vibrating. The voice stopped. The counting on the rope stopped. The boat was suddenly just a boat again. The lantern was out, but the night had shifted toward dawn, so there was this little smudge of gray at the horizon. The bridge lights looked smaller. Somewhere far off, a truck made that long, low highway sound. I could hear the live well pump ticking again, not drowned out by other things. I could hear a frog. I breathed in with my nose, and it didn't smell like pennies anymore. It smelled like damp earth and fish. I made a choice then that I don't stand by and don't apologize for. I told Dale to sit down. He did. I told him to keep his hands inside the boat, as if we were on a roller coaster with a safety talk. I coiled the anchor rope neat, and I pitched the anchor again, not to tie us, but to see what happened. It went down without a hitch. No pinch, no jerk, no beads. I pulled it back up. It came up clean. I set it on the deck, not even bothering to tie it this time. I put the trolling motor back on the transom. I hooked the clamps to the battery. It sparked once, not too big. I lowered the prop into the water and turned the head toward the ramp. The prop made its thin little whirl. The bow nosed around. We moved. I didn't say anything. Dale didn't either. In that quiet, I gave myself rules. I do that sometimes. It makes things feel like a job instead of an accident. Rule 1. Don't look over the side. Rule 2. Don't stop. Rule 3. Keep the motor straight and don't correct too much. Rule 4. If the voice comes back, do not listen for meaning. If you're someone who's never been in trouble out on water, this all probably sounds dramatic. It wasn't. It was work. The kind of work where if you stop to drop a tool or to scratch your face, you're going to put your hand into a blade. I aimed the boat like I was painting a line. The marker buoy near the center of the reservoir slipped by on our right. The old hill with the short, knotty trees crept toward us, and then seemed to hang back like it didn't want to get closer. The trolling motor pushed in that steady, valiant little way. I told it thank you in my head like it was a person. Halfway across, the bells chimed again. Not a lot, just once, in unison. Dale's hand twitched. He didn't reach for the rod. Good. We kept moving. The voice pressed a palm up under the aluminum again and pushed a shape into it that had laugh rhythm. I did not look. We kept moving. We got close enough to the ramp to see its concrete ribs in the dawn gray. A guy in a hoodie was walking his dog on the path above it. He had a coffee. It was a two-hand hold-it kind of morning, and the steam looked like smoke from a small, honest fire. The ordinary feel of that sight almost made me cry. I'm not someone who cries, but it hit me like the smell of a kitchen after a funeral. When we were maybe 100 yards out, the boat shivered. That's the only word. Not a bump, not a lean, not a strike. A shiver, like the metal knew cold. The trolling motor whined and then pitched up like it was out of water, even though it wasn't. The boat stopped. Not completely, but it stopped making new ripples and only rode the ones it had already made. The dog on shore paused and looked up at us, ears forward. The guy in the hoodie kept walking. Almost there, Dale said. He said it like a dad who promised ice cream at the end of errands. The water on our left made a little line, like a seam in fabric. It moved toward us slow. I didn't look at it. I watched the ramp. I watched the stupid rectangle of dry we had to hit to make this not either a swim or a story we'd never talk about. That seam touched the hull with the gentleness of my wife's hand on my shoulder in the morning when she wants me to wake up without scaring me. It ran along us, patient. It parted around the trolling motor shaft, and for a second the prop spun free and whined high. Then it bit again and dug and moved us half a foot. Then it spun and whined, then bit, like we were riding a zipper. I could have gunned it, but there was nothing to gun. All I could do was hold the handle straight and count in my head to 60, and then count again, and then count again, like a kid trying not to think about anything else while he gets a shot. The dog barked once, high and manly. The guy with the coffee looked up at us, finally. He raised his hand like a wave, but it wasn't a greeting. It was a, "Hey, do you guys need help?" I nodded, small, like I was lying, like I was telling him, "No, we're fine." We moved again. The bow nosed toward the ramp. We hit the concrete with a little hollow bang. The trolling motor prop hit too and made an ugly plastic skitter. I killed it. We drifted forward 6 inches and settled. The boat made that hollow metal sound on concrete that tells you you're not going to die in water tonight. The guy with the dog tied the leash to the rail and came down the ramp without being asked and grabbed the bow line and pulled us up 2 feet. He said, "You boys okay?" I said, "Motor's acting up." And I smiled full teeth like I'd learned something crucial about lying. Dale nodded and did that roofer's shrug that says, "What are you going to do?" "You're bleeding," the guy said, and I looked down and saw that my hand had dripped on the bench and on my jeans and in a tidy line across the live well lid. I said, "Ah," and then I said, "Yeah," and then I said, "I slipped on the anchor rope." And that wasn't a lie. Not really. He said he had a first aid kit in his truck if I wanted it, and I told him I had one in mine. He said, "Cool," like he was apologizing for asking anything at all. He helped us slide the boat onto the trailer bumpers. Dale walked it up while I winched. We brought her onto dry like pulling in a sick dog. The guy unhooked his leash, and his dog made this little sidestep like he didn't want to walk in the water splash. And then they were gone, and the bridge lights were off, and the reservoir looked like a blacktop parking lot. No one would visit until noon. Everything after that was regular. We did it all with our hands. The outboard still wouldn't start, but I stopped caring about that a lot faster than I expected. We took the fish out of the live well and let it go. Dale lifted it under the belly and held it in the water and moved it back and forth until it kicked. It did this irritated tail slap and left. That made me feel weirdly guilty. I don't know why. I got the straps over the boat and ratcheted them down without looking at the water. Dale put the lantern in the milk crate and put a towel over it like a parrot. I wrapped my hand with gauze and tape from my truck kit. We drove to his place first because it was on the way. He said nothing. I said nothing. He got out and lifted his cooler like it weighed a lot more than it should. And he said, "Text me." And I said, "Yep." When I got home, my wife said, "You're late." Not mad, more surprised. She looked at my hand and lifted her eyebrows. I said, "Rope burn." And she nodded like that made sense. She said, "Did you catch any?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Huh," with a tone like the lake had broken some deal. Then she went on with her morning. I showered. The hot water hit my hand and I made a face. And she said from the bedroom, "You okay?" And I said, "Yep." And I meant it in the way that means no, but we're alive. I didn't look at my phone for a while. When I did, there was a missed call from Dale at like 9 in the morning that I slept through. Then a text that said, "Hey man, you want to go later this week? Daytime? Take the boat out to the point and cast for walleye?" And I wrote back, "Sure," without thinking. Then I stared at the word "sure" for a long time. Like if I looked at it hard enough, it would tell me what I really thought. After another minute I wrote, "Not the dam." And he replied immediately, "LOL, nope." I didn't go though. Not that week, not the next. The outboard needed a new plug, and I forgot I took the battery from the trolling motor into the shop and told the guy it wasn't holding charge, and he tested it and said it was fine, and I said, "Huh," a bunch until he offered to keep it overnight. And then I forgot to pick it up. I came home too late from work to make an evening bite. It was stupid avoidance, and I knew it. But it felt like not picking a scab. About 2 weeks later, I was messing around in my garage, and that rope burn on my palm itched. It had healed up mostly. 2 neat pink lines with shiny new skin. They had scabbed clean, no ooze, like the cut was as neat as the rope had been. I scratched it without thinking, and I swear to you, I felt the rhythm of those little on-off tugs again for a second. That bead counting. It was so vivid I looked around for the rope, as if I'd brought it home. It passed. It left that taste in my mouth again, that penny taste. And I got mad and yelled, "Knock it off." And my wife yelled down the stairs, "What?" And I said, "The damn mice are back." Because that's what popped into my head, like that was the correct kind of lie for that moment. I slept badly. I had a stupid dream where I was in elementary school, and my desk was made of aluminum with little ribs, and the teacher's voice wasn't words, just a shape. And when I pressed my ear to the desk, it felt like reading by listening. I woke up at 3 with my heart going too fast. I went downstairs. I stood in the kitchen and looked at the sink and thought about running the faucet just to hear it be normal. I didn't. I went back upstairs. I lay down and put my palm over my eyes, and the itch calmed. And I slept. The next day, Dale came by. He doesn't announce himself. He honks the horn and walks around back, and comes in the back door like it's 1998. He brought me a pack of hooks because he'd been at the bait shop, and they had a sale, and he cannot not buy something when they put a little orange sticker on it. He looked fine. That bothered me in a way I felt stupid about. Like if he looked messed up, it would match the texture of the memory in my head. He sat at my kitchen table and drank my coffee and told me about a roofing job that paid better than it should have. And we laughed about a guy we know who always underbids and then complains. Then he said, "You think that was a log?" And I said, "No." And he nodded and didn't push. He said something else that made my stomach drop. It was simple. It should have been nothing. He said, "You ever used a trot line?" And I said, "Yeah, my uncle used to set one on the river." He said, "You remember how he tied knots in the droppers? Every 6 inches? One of those tight, neat knots with a twist in it? So he knew where he was on the line by feel in the dark." I didn't say anything. I didn't want to talk about knots. He said, "I can't stop thinking about that. Like feeling a line and just knowing where everything is on it by touch. Knowing where you are in the dark. That's a thing you can do. That's a thing I've done. So why am I acting like we felt something completely alien? It was just..." He trailed off and drank coffee. "Just what?" I asked, because he looked like he wanted me to. He shrugged. "Just way bigger than any trot line I've ever set." We sat there a while. He told a story about a crow stealing a sandwich from a guy on a roof. He laughed the way he always laughs, with his head back. He didn't laugh like the shape of a laugh. He laughed like a person. When he left, I stood in the yard and watched him go and pretended like I was looking at the fence. I scratched my palm. It didn't itch. I took the trash out and set it at the curb and stood there for a second feeling like the air was regular. I hate that word. Regular. But that's what it felt like. The street was a street. A bird did bird things. That night I went out to the garage, climbed into the boat on the trailer, and sat. It was dark in there. The garage light made a little yellow circle. The boat smelled like old fish and mud and aluminum and gasoline. I ran my fingers along the ribs. I listened. I didn't hear anything. I sat there until my wife opened the door to the kitchen and said, "You coming to bed?" And I said, "Yep." And I got out of the boat and turned off the light and the garage went black. I stood in it another second longer than I should have, daring myself to be stupid. And then I went in. I wish I could say that's the end. It is, mostly. I haven't been out on that reservoir after dark since. I've fished in the daytime. Plenty. The walleye bite turns on in the afternoon by the point. You'll see a muddy swirl, and then a flash, and your heart will move just the right amount. That's what fishing is supposed to be. I've launched at the same ramp. I've walked the same concrete, with the same little ribs. I've brought my kids down there on a Sunday morning and thrown bread at geese and told them not to get too close, because geese are jerks. I've done all the normal things. But if I'm being honest with you, if I'm telling this like we're sitting in my garage with the door open and the night bugs tapping at the bulb, and our chairs are creaking and we're finishing beers, there are 3 details I leave out when I tell this to other people. I'm not sure why. Maybe because they sound small. Maybe because they make it worse. The first, 2 days after that night, I checked the hooks I'd tied on at home. The ones we didn't use. I keep them neat in a little Ziploc. I remember I tied 6. 3 were in there. 3 were not. That's normal enough. Hooks get used, you forget. But the Ziploc was sealed. I keep it sealed because my garage has mice, and I hate finding mouse poop on tackle. It was sealed. 3 hooks gone. The second. A week later, at that same ramp, there was a short post on the bulletin board where people put notices about lost dogs and yard sales. It was a piece of paper with boat prop found, written in big letters and a phone number. That's not interesting by itself. People lose props. But under that, in smaller writing, it said, also found, bell, small, clips on, and then call to describe. I didn't call. I didn't need to say what it looked like. I knew what it looked like. That bell wasn't bright brass. It was dull and nicked. It had a line bite on it where I'd once reeled without unclipping and scarred the little lip. It was mine. I had thrown it into the live well. It had left the live well. The third. Last Saturday, my wife took our kids to her mom's for the afternoon, and I was alone in the house with the sound of the fridge and the occasional car. I decided to clean the fish smell out of the boat for real. I pulled the live well lid. I scrubbed the inside with bleach water. I took the pump apart to get the grit out of the impeller. At the very bottom of the live well, tucked under the pump intake, was a piece of line I don't use. I spool with braids or mono in certain colors. This was something else. It was a short, ugly length of twine. It had knots tied every inch. The knots were neat and tight. They looked like they had been rolled between fingers that had a lot of practice. There was a smell on it, a smell that wasn't fish or lake. It smelled like copper and wet dirt, and a little like when you open an old toolbox that no one has opened in years. I put it in a sandwich bag without thinking, and then stood there with the bag in my hand for 5 minutes like an idiot, like the bag was about to do a trick. Then I walked it out to the trash and tucked it deep under coffee grounds and eggshells. Later, when I put the can at the curb, a knot of me wanted to reach in and pull the bag out and save it, and that scared me in a new way, a domestic way. I left it in the can and watched the truck crush it. I have a new rule. I don't fish that reservoir at night. If somebody asks, I tell them there's too many snags. That's true enough. If somebody presses, I look them in the eye and say, don't fish there at night. Then I smile because that's easier on people. They laugh and say, oh, come on. And I let them laugh and they either go or they don't. Most don't. Everyone's got some instinct. They act like they don't, but they do. Sometimes when it's late and I'm wiped out and I'm sitting on the back steps lacing up my boots for tomorrow, I hear that nothing voice from the reservoir in the shape of my wife's voice say my name from the kitchen, and then ask me a question she'd ask. The same little rise at the end. And I answer her and wait. And the real her from upstairs says, what? And comes down, and we do normal things. And I don't tell her that I answered a shape. If you think this doesn't add up, that it's just the story of 2 idiots getting spooked by logs and wind and the micro sounds of boats and a funny prop wash, that's fine. That's the smart way to hold it. I keep trying to hold it that way. I keep telling myself about current and snags and turtle shells, about sound bouncing weird off hills, about what lantern light does to distance. Most days it works. The lake looks like a lake. The boat is a boat. But when I walk past the garage and smell that old aluminum and gasoline and shad from a day ago that still lives in the pores of the boat, something in me tightens like a knot-to-knot line pulling taut. I don't think about monsters. I think about that steady, polite, patient way. Something counted us down there in the dark, like it had all the time in the world, like we were just another marker on a long line it knew by touch. And I don't fish at night anymore. Not there. Not anywhere. Not because I'm a coward. Because I'm not. Because I don't want to hear my life said back to me by something that doesn't need the words.